Everyone's ready? I'd like to call this special meeting of the Holyoke City Council to order. The clerk, in her absence, I will be reading the roll call, and if you'll bear with me, we're just going to vote alphabetically this evening. Councilor Alexander.
Here.
Councilor Bartley.
Here.
Councilor Bresnahan.
Here.
Councilor Shadno.
Here.
Councilor Graney.
Here.
Councilor Jordan is here. Councilor Leahy.
Present.
Councilor LeBron Martinez.
Here.
Councilor Lisi.
Here.
Councilor McGee. Here. Councilor McGivern.
Here.
Councilor Soto. Councilor Tallman.
Here.
Councilor Vacan.
Here.
Councilor Valentin.
Here.
All right, all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
God bless America.
And the City of Holyoke.
And the City Council.
And the Pearl Harbor vets. Amen.
Yes.
They have infamy. Yes.
Councilors, we have an abbreviated agenda. As you know, this is a special meeting simply to deal with matters related to the budget reconciliation. We're going to be dealing with matters of various transfers for your consideration to, one, balance the budget, as well as appropriation, your consideration of some transfers relative to the stabilization fund. Okay?
Mr. President,
Yes, Councilor
can we
Valentin.
suspend the rules and allow any counselors-elect in the audience that wish to come in to be able to
Second the
join us?
motion?
Second.
Absolutely. Motion's been made and seconded to suspend the rules to allow any counselors-elect to join us for this meeting. Counselor-elect Roman is with us this evening. All in favor of that?
Aye.
Opposed, so moved. Counselor Roman, by all means, please join us. Welcome. Thank you for that. And we do have public comment on the agenda. I did have one individual sign up to speak to the city council relative to a budget matter,
Side to sit on.
and we'll address that at this time. And then we're going to go into some communications, and then we'll go right into the matter at hand, okay? Is Chad Cunningham with us? Chad, welcome. If you would be kind enough to go up to the microphone, please make sure it's on. Chad is the Vice President of Local 1693. Chad, if you could just give us your residential address too, that's one of the requirements.
Yes, I do not actually live in Holyoke.
Okay.
I'm here to represent the union. President Butler is at the fire commissioners meeting. He was unable to attend.
Okay, that's fine. Could you just give us your residential address, please?
I live on Parsons Street in East Hampton, Mass., number
Okay.
57.
Thank you very much, Chad. The floor is yours.
First, I would like to thank the council and President Jourdain for allowing me to speak. I am here representing the Holyoke firefighters. We are asking for, and we are supporting the mayor and his request for $700,000 from the stabilization fund. The fire department is underfunded, and at a time in this year we're somewhat understaffed. We've since brought up our staffing as one of the reasons to address some of our issues with overtime. And we are still actively working with the city to address those issues, and we're working very hard to do that. But we need some of this money that the mayor's asking for to keep the citizens safe and to keep the firefighters safe and to be able to staff all the fire engines necessary to keep moving forward with that. You know, we stand behind the mayor in this, and we're very grateful for him to step up and try to keep us going. But it's going to take the council to also see that it's not just a few $100,000 out of the stabilization fund, it's people's lives too that are going to be put at risk without this money. And we would ask for support of the mayor. Thank you.
Chad, if you could answer one question for me. As you know, and you've just elucidated that you want us to take $700,000 from stabilization, you know that that doesn't fund any money for fire overtime. Is there a transfer coming in from free cash to give it to fire overtime?
It's my understanding that the mayor is trying to get some of this money to help fund the police and fire and keep moving forward for the remainder of the fiscal year. How the transfer is going to be done is up to the mayor and the fire chief, I'd imagine.
Okay, well, maybe we could suspend the rules and maybe hear from the mayor momentarily on that. Okay, thank you very much, Chad,
Thank
for
you.
coming. We appreciate those thoughts. All right, now, as you know, we have the special meeting laid out here. We have a communication from the mayor as well. Let's see here. This came in at 2:09 PM this afternoon, so I don't believe this could have possibly made it to the agenda that was published, since it came in at 2:09 this afternoon. That's certainly before 48 hours prior to the meeting. And so now we go to reports of committees, and there you have it. We have some Finance Committee reports, and the chairman will just briefly go through just some of the procedurals. As you know, Todd, we're now up to item 4A on the agenda, and if you could just walk us through, so it's not too confusing as to what these, how we're procedurally going to handle those, because then afterwards, we have 3 items afterwards on the agenda relative to various free cash and stabilization options, okay?
Right,
So if you could
so-
just walk us through that, I'd recognize the chair, Todd McGee.
Yeah, so what we have before us is, finance was just before this meeting, and we took up the orders that we received at the last city council. Some were not in proper form, so what'll happen is you'll hear a request to deny. It's not so much to deny it because we didn't like it, it's because it wasn't in proper form, of which in a folder for tonight's meeting will be orders that should be in proper form so we can act on them. And really what we have is, we have certification from the state. At one point, it was certified on November 24th. The general fund was $1,776,631, and then the sewer fund was $463,682 for a grand total of $2,240,313. On December 4th, the auditor, along with our outside auditing department, dealt with the state, and the state then recertified, adding $296,050 to the free cash account. So it went from that 1.72, a little over $2 million. The sewer fund stayed exactly the same. So really what you have now is you have an increase of roughly $300,000 to be added to the general fund, which then, taking that into consideration, you had 2 requests, one for $700,000 for taken from stabilization to add to the free cash, whatever we take from it, to then try and balance the budget going forward. There's another request for $450 in order to, instead of taking the full $700, take $450 from stabilization plus free cash amounts to then balance the budget that way. Wednesday, we're going to have a special meeting with regards to 150. Is that correct, Mr. President?
Only if the mayor submits it, but we have a,
Okay.
we do have a Wednesday, procedurally, we do have a Wednesday meeting scheduled in the event that we do not have enough transfers here this evening to balance it, and we needed another evening. So I did schedule Wednesday
Okay.
if necessary.
So in essence, what we really have before us, depending on how things get voted on, is you're going to take, first you're going to certify free cash. And then from there, you're going to take from free cash and whatever from stabilization, whatever we vote on, 450, or if we ultimately get the choice on the 150, to then apply both accounts and then balance the budget so that Tony in the assessor's office can then help us set the tax rate. And then from there, we'll set the tax rate and get those bills out. So that's what the committee took up. Also within there was a request for $500,000 from health insurance, of which what we found out tonight was about 79 enrollees that normally are part of the health insurance count didn't, or whatever calculation was done, so that was allowed to come back into us so we can use that money as well towards balancing everything. So those are all the numbers. I know it's a little confusing, but as we all know, everything came in last minute, and we've hustled to try and get the numbers out to everyone to try and understand what's going on. I can open up for questions, or
Well, yeah,
you can
I'd
see
like
how you
to,
want.
just to make things a little bit easier, I think it would be wisest if we, I do have the rewrite on item 4C, which is the 500,000, and that this is to go to deficit reduction.
Okay.
Perhaps we suspend the rules to go right to that item, and then you may want to consider, Mr. Chairman, that we suspend the rules to take up 4A and 4B as a package, because they're kind of paired together. There's
Take
one,
take the first one up, the 500,000, make a motion to suspend the rules to take up the 500,000.
Second.
so let me go to that. Motion's been made and seconded to go, suspend the rules and go to item 4C. And this is a report from the Committee on Finance, to whom was referred in order that there be and hereby appropriated by transfer in fiscal year 2016, $500,000 from health insurance to balancing the budget. And we have a new rewrite. The committee recommendation is that it be denied. However, we do now have the correct, that was because this was in improper form. We now have the correct form here that the
So,
auditor has given us.
To make it easy, the first one to deny, we should act upon, make a motion to pass the first reading to deny. And then after that, we can take up the proper form, so that way we don't confuse each other, or,
I would recommend that we, because there's no other, this 500 doesn't appear anywhere else on the agenda, I would recommend that you make a motion to amend the committee report to substitute in the new one.
Right,
and
if you
then-
wanna do it that
And then
way,
people
yeah.
can make a motion to then approve the committee
okay.
report.
So make a motion, or second your motion that we.
Okay, so the
just,
motion
make
on
it
the
easy.
floor is to amend the committee report, to substitute it with the new language as is articulated on the agenda labeled 4C, and that motion be, the committee recommendation is to. Approve. And that be approved. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Second.
Second. Okay, under discussion on the 500,000, anybody else like to be heard on item number 4C? Counselor Bacon.
Thank you. I would note that the questions were asked and answered, and I received a clarification after the public part of the finance meeting, that a large portion of this fund is paid for by the HG&E, and it comes back into the city from that quasi-municipal branch, if you will. So it is a combination of that, as well as the change in the enrollees and the people changing from plan to plan. And that is a large part of the explanation as to why last year it was basically the same amount as this year. Going forward, since that is known, that factor should be addressed upfront in the budget so that we don't have the $500,000 surprise again, because it really isn't a surprise, and the difference would be significantly less than that going forward. Thank you.
Counselor Alexander.
Thanks. Just to clarify for my own head, the only difference between what was in front of the committee and what's in front of us now is what was in front of the committee said it was coming from insurance to nowhere in particular, and now it says from insurance to balancing the budget.
Exactly.
So the only thing is, what are
Just-
we doing with the money?
Procedural.
Okay, and the committee would have voted in the affirmative had it had a destination for the funds.
Correct. The sole reason denial originally was because of improper form. That has been fixed. Counselor Graney.
And just to point out, from what I understand from the discussions, that nobody that's under the health insurance plan in Hoyoke are going to suffer from this. It's going to be status quo.
We're told that there's exactly right, that there's 79 less employees and they just did not need this money.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And in fact, the employees did speak at the committee meeting saying they did not object. Counselor McGivern.
Just, what is the motion on the floor at the moment?
The motion on the floor is to amend the committee report to substitute the language, the correct formed language, and then to make the committee recommendation instead of to deny as to approve.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of passing the first reading?
Aye.
Wait a minute, we're just
Opposed?
on the amendment, correct? You need multiple readings on the
Well,
amendment?
okay, on substituting the amendment in the language, all in favor of that?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. So the committee report is amended. Now on, you want to make a motion on adopting
Motion
first
to
reading?
pass the first reading.
Okay, a motion on approving first reading. Any discussion?
Yes, please, just again, to
Counselor
be clear,
Alexander.
the committee recommendation is now to approve the transfer?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? All in favor of passing the first reading?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So okay. No, noted on the voice vote.
Pass the second reading, motion to
Okay,
pass. the
motion's
second.
been made and seconded to pass the second reading. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. Let me get my roll call sheet. On adoption of item, committee report 4C, Counselor Alexander.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Bartley.
Yes.
Counselor Bresnahan.
No.
Counselor Shatnoff.
Yes.
Counselor Graney.
Yes.
Counselor Jordan votes yes. Counselor Leahy.
Yes.
Counselor LeBron Martinez.
Yes.
Counselor Lisi.
Yes.
Counselor McGee.
Yes.
Counselor McGivern.
Yes.
Counselor Tallman.
Yes.
Counselor Vacan.
Yes.
Counselor Valentin.
Yes.
13 yeas, 1 nay, and as you know, we have 1 member absent. That is adopted. So that takes care of item 4C. We now have, as I have recommended, that 4A and B be taken as a package. And then I would recommend, Mr. Chairman, that, let's see,
Which ones you have before? 'Cause I don't
450,
know what was in the
we
JAG.
do not have any substituted language for items 4A and 4B, just so we're aware of that.
And which ones are those?
That is the $700,000 from stabilization and the 1.742705 million from free cash to balance budget. It doesn't describe whether it's general fund or sewer.
Do you have the 450 one?
Yeah, we do, and that appears on the agenda as items 9, 10, and 11. That's the other option.
Other options on the agenda.
But the first option is, there is no correct verbiage for this, for the other proposal.
President,
Yes.
I would make a motion to suspend the rules to allow our auditor to add the correct language as he did to the prior order before we get into discussion on this package.
Okay.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to give the auditor leave to amend items 4A and 4B. So let me make sure.
And once
I
again,
have
the only amendment is clarifying it goes to balancing the budget, right?
No, the money changed.
Well, I think there's gonna be a tad bit more to 4B in that there is no division between, sewer and general fund free cash, as opposed to items marked 11, 10, and 11 on the budget, on the, agenda. This, we have one item that says 1.742 million. So he would have to allocate that.
Clarification?
Sure.
In our original, not our original package, but the communication from the clerk's office, an order was filed under Counselor McGee's name with the 1.742 by itself.
That's right, and that's what I have right here.
Okay, so it has nothing to do with the sewer fund.
That's right, well, it doesn't say on here, Joe, if it's general fund or sewer or both. On items 10 and 11 on the agenda, it says clearly this much for general fund and this much for sewer. But in the other one, the 1.7, it doesn't say which fund. Is it combined? Is it just general fund? Is it some of sewer and general fund? We would need him to correct that.
But this number is the number on the communication, which divides the sewer fund from the general fund, and this is the exact number for the general fund.
Right.
I think,
Well, I would assume that they were gonna use the sewer fund free cash as well under the other proposal. Well, there's nothing here for general fund. Under proposal 1, we don't have any, so that would mean if you vote for just the 1.7, there's no sewer fund free cash being appropriated. But I don't think that's the intent of proposal 1. And I see the auditor shaking his head.
Motion to suspend the rules, allow the auditor to speak.
Second.
Sure, by all means. Motion's been made and seconded to allow the auditor to speak. All in favor? Opposed, so moved. Bellamy, if you'd come address this.
You are correct. The intent was to use the entire sewer fund free cash, and then the balance was from the general fund of the 1.7 million of the original order, which I thought we were, based on last week's discussion, you were just jettisoning and we put in new orders.
Right, and you
use
did for option 2, but it doesn't look like option 1 ever got the,
Option 1, sorry, I'm having trouble with.
the one that goes hand in hand with the 700,000 stabilization.
There's a $450,000 stabilization option.
Yeah, we've got that.
submitted.
You're good on the
So-
450 option, and then
And
you,
the 700, those go together.
Yeah, so
And then there was $1,700,000 of free cash, and that's now been supplanted by $450,000 of sewer fund free cash, and I think it was $1,500,000 of, I can't remember the number for the free.
well, that'll go with the,
Right.
but my
So I'm trying
point
to figure
is,
out what's missing,
okay, then let me help explain.
yeah.
You have two proposals. One is 700,000 from stabilization. Therefore, you would need some number that adds up to the 1742705 to go with that.
Correct.
And what I'm telling you is on this order, it has just that number. It doesn't say, it just has one number. It doesn't say so much for sewer, so much for
Correct,
general
that's what I
fund.
said to begin with, that's correct.
Okay,
That
that
was
needs
the
to be
error.
fixed, that's the point. That hasn't been fixed yet.
I thought you threw that whole idea out, so I didn't fix it.
Well, no,
I gave you a
in
new
fairness,
option.
yeah, I'm not for it, but that is option one.
Kevin did throw it out.
Yes, right, thank you, exactly
But
right.
that is-
My impression was that the council threw it out last
your
week,
thinking.
I know,
and
right.
we started all
Yeah,
over
right, yeah.
again.
What Kevin says isn't always the way it goes.
Exactly.
Happy to
If
amend
only
it.
it were. If I wish I had a
Happy to
magic
amend
wand.
it if you'll read me the numbers.
Yeah, sure. So, I think what you would want to do, Bellamy, is I think you're gonna wanna take from the 1742705.12. From that, you would wanna say 463,682 is for sewer, and then whatever the subtraction is on that is for general fund.
You are correct.
All right, so if you could just write that and sign your name to it,
I'll
I
just-
think that's what we're
Is that what
looking
you want me to
for.
do? Fine.
Yeah, yeah,
Give me
why
a
don't you
piece of
take
paper.
this?
Need a calculator, Bill?
No, actually, I don't. I can do math.
Okay.
I'm old enough that I was taught math in school.
Wow.
It's refreshing.
And so that will go. But why don't we put this item on the floor, so at least we can begin to have a conversation about it to keep this process moving while he's waiting for us. So is the intent to substitute this new language, I believe, for the committee,
Yeah, I know, I'm listening.
the committee jacket? I don't know if that would have been the intent, therefore, of the committee recommendation. I think we'd have to probably stay with the deny recommendation, unless we're mind readers.
Was a motion to allow
But we, yeah, but we could say, we could do approve, that this be approved as the vote, and then, of course, people can vote yes or no, and then whatever, if there's 2/3 or not. And then we'll have as we know, there's option 2, which is the 450.
So first, you're just motioning you want a motion just to adopt the amended language?
To adopt the amended
Into the
language
report.
for the item marked,
So it's not a vote on whether we want to adopt the report, it's a vote on
Just
whether we
adopt
want
the
to
language.
substitute the
The-
language. that's all.
substitute the language of 4B so that it totals 1742705, but mindful that that is a division that actually, by your
sewer
vote,
and main.
is 463,682 in sewer, and then the remainder is coming from the general fund free
Okay, so I'll make a motion to accept the revised language into the
for
report.
4B. Okay.
Second.
So all in favor of that?
Aye.
Okay, so moved. So 4B is amended when Bellamy gives me those numbers. 700 stands on its own. That is in good form, other than to say it's supposed to stay from stabilization fund to balanced budget. So that actually will need Bellamy to also sign off on that, because it just says cash to cash.
Make a motion to accept that revised language, then?
Second.
All in favor of that?
Aye.
Also, Mr. Bellamy on this one, if you could just mark this and say. So, we now have proposal 1 before us.
You want this seat?
Is there a motion to take items 4A and 4B as a package, since they pretty much go hand in hand?
For discussion, but not for voting purposes, is that what you're going to do?
You could do it for either.
Don't you have to vote separately on
No,
it?
you could, as long as it's a roll call vote, you could vote on them together as a package.
If they don't go as a package, it won't work.
Correct.
Right.
You kind of
You
need
have to
to.
vote. You have to vote for
The
a package.
numbers,
To get to that one number.
Exactly.
Whichever way we do it.
so you really need to think of, option one, the 700,000 from stabilization package, and then option two, the 450 package.
But don't we need to vote on one of those two options
You need to, well, we could vote on both of them.
simultaneously?
No.
Oh, okay.
No,
That's
it's
what I
two
was-
separate
okay.
votes.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. President,
got
as
confused.
a point of order, if the total of the free cash has changed, don't we need to accept the free cash first? So we know what we're talking about?
Well, there's some dispute whether or not we actually vote to accept free cash or not.
Well,
No,
but
we need
don't
to
even
vote to accept the
have-
certification.
We don't even
not the
have the
money itself.
total
What would
money.
be our money?
Well, we don't have a thing this evening on the new number certification.
Here's my issue. We're voting on balancing the budget. We're not talking about how much free cash we have. That is $300,000 more than these proposals have on the table.
I would agree with your procedural point of order if the amount, the state had reduced it by 300, for example, and that they were now suggesting to use free cash that we didn't have anymore. But they're using, under either scenario, numbers that are smaller than how much the state allowed. So they're proposing in this 1.7, or in the other scenario, 2 million of free cash. But what they're saying to us is 2.5 now has been certified.
Correct. But that number is not before us in any public way, except that it did come up in
True.
Finance Committee.
True.
And I've never sat through any budget process in the city where we didn't know how much free cash there was. And I think it should be known to the public how much free cash there is.
We did that.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Lise, I saw your hand up.
Sorry. Just wanted to suspend the necessary rules and allow the mayor to approach to clarify some of the questions around certification, and if we need to recertify free cash if we had voted to approve the certification regardless of what the number is.
Okay. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Okay. All in favor of suspending the rules to allow the mayor to address the council on this issue?
Aye.
All in favor? Okay, adopted. Alex, if you could just touch bases with us on this issue about the new 300 and
Thank you,
certification.
councilors. And I'll just repeat a little bit what I said in the Finance Committee, and I sent an email, or the clerk on my behalf sent an email out clarifying some of the updates in regards to the additional $300,000 in free cash that was clarified by the state on Friday and sent to you. And I want to reiterate again that you have two options before you tonight, and that is to balance the budget with $1.7 million in the combined free cash to go towards balancing the budget. And that first option would be 1.7 in free cash plus $700,000 in stabilization. The second option is $450,000 from stabilization and about $2 million from the combined free cash. Option one, using $700,000 from stabilization, would leave $800,000 in the free cash account to get to the end of the fiscal year. Option two would leave $550,000 between now and the end of the fiscal year in the free cash account. I provided both options because I wanted to make sure we can get this done tonight. There is no $150,000 from stabilization option before you tonight, and I have no plans to submit it. I think it's financially responsible to, number one, consider the $700,000, and given the anticipated expenses that we already heard about tonight, overtime for police and fire, that was already answered by me via email to the council president, an estimate of $400,000 between those two departments alone, and plus an anticipated expense in the law department for claims and litigation that was cut during the budget process. And so I think leaving $800,000 in free cash between now and the rest of the year prevents us from coming back into stabilization before the end of the year, which would have damaging effects on the city's credit. However, although I advocate for $700,000 from stabilization, I heard many councilors last week that they wanted another option, and therefore I submitted the $450,000 option as well, again with the hope that we could get this budget balanced tonight. If there's not consensus around $700, perhaps there's consensus around $450, so we don't need a special meeting on Wednesday night. We can get this done, have the hearing, set the tax rate, and make sure our departments are working together to get these tax bills on time. And so I think we can take action tonight by debating the merits of the 700 versus the 450. But again, I think you heard it from our financial advisor tonight. We need to take a first step tonight, and then, as I said in the communication today, work together to put together a plan for FY17 that both focuses on our structural deficit, makes some tough cuts, but also works together to generate some new revenue in the next fiscal year as well. And so that is where we are at this point. The $300,000 additional is obviously welcome news and just provides a little more breathing room for the city to get to the end of the fiscal year. But as others alluded to, there will be a number of difficult decisions mid-year. You've already been communicated to that we've had to not refill some positions. We had to make a few cuts here and there. We'll continue to do that. And we'll continue to make even tougher decisions when we craft the FY17 budget. But again, I advocate for the 700. Option 2 is the 450. But most of all, let's get this done tonight and move on and set the tax rate. Thank you.
Mr. President.
Yeah, sure, Counselor Bacon.
In the answer to my question, Mayor, which was how much free cash we now had with the additional 300,000, is it correct that that figure is $2,072,681?
It's a combined
As a-
general fund free cash, yes. You combine that with the
That's-
sewer, it's about 2.5.
Right, but I'm talking about general fund free cash. So rather than the 1776, it's 2072 that is available.
Yes.
Correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
And as the auditor said before, that money exists. The council could take a vote to officially accept that revised communication from the state if you so choose, but it's not necessary. And so I'll defer to the council on that.
As you know, the rules require that we cannot add items to agenda meeting, communications or otherwise, to a special meeting. If this were a regular meeting, then we could do it as a late file, but for special meetings, unfortunately, we cannot. We're mindful of that communication, but we won't be able to accept it until our next meeting next week. Councilor Lisi, did you have your hand up?
I have one more question. So what I understand is item 4, A in the agenda is now being supplanted by item number 9.
No.
No.
No. We have one package, which is going to be, as I'm suggesting to you, we should combine 4A and B together, because in one hand, there's the stabilization fund appropriation of 700, coupled with a free cash amount that is necessary, 1.7 million. Put those two together gets us to the 2.4, which is the remaining budget deficit. Or option 2, which is articulated in the items 9, 10, and 11, which is the stabilization fund of 450 coupled with 2 million in free cash. And that would be also balance the budget. So the whole question really hinges on how much money out of stabilization. That's the only difference between the two. One's 700, one is 450.
But in the same way that we just, quote unquote, amended 4C to reflect the new language and the reality of the finances, that it was going from, health insurance to balance the budget, which wasn't on the original order. Couldn't we say that 700 from stabilization to balance the budget is equivalent to 450 to balance the budget?
No, we can't change the number. Like, for example, one was, with respect to we didn't change the 500,000. We, as you know, cannot originate any appropriations, and this is an appropriation. It's an appropriation, in this case, by virtue of reducing our budget that we've adopted, which was an appropriation. And as you know, in state law, only that can originate with the mayor. It does need our approval, which we just did with the 500. We can't change that number. I couldn't change that 500 even with an amendment to say 250, for example. That it's either up or down on that number. Yep. The other proposal is to say, and I believe it's not the mayor's intent, to have us go with this big number for, or a bigger number, for example, of free cash with the bigger number of stabilization, because the goal is to get to 2.4 million. You wouldn't want to appropriate more money than 2.4 because you don't need to adjust the budget by more than the 2.4 number. So that's why these things need to be paired with each other. The 450 with this free cash amount and this stabilization number with this free cash, so that the two options equal 2.4 million. And so we'll vote on one as a package, one as the other, and then whatever the 2/3 majority here feel is the way we should go.
But I think that from what I hear you saying then is that we really only have one option, which is the new orders 9, 10, and 11, because
No, because we sort of were able to fix that by the motion earlier. Originally, had Bellamy not either been here or not fixed the language, then yeah, you're right, we only would have had option 2. We wouldn't have had option 1, but option 1's back on the table because, with the 700,000, because we did fix the deficient language. So that has now been fixed and given to me, and Bellamy signed off on that.
and then 4B, although it doesn't say it on there, breaks down into, I don't know the numbers anymore, but.
Yeah, it's, the number is I'll give that to you here. It's 463,682 of sewer fund, and 1,279,023 and 62 cents from the general fund, free cash.
Which,
Hopefully equals 1,742,705. I'm sure his math was good.
yeah, I mean, it's roughly 2.4, and then the other set of numbers is again 2.4.
Hopefully, I'm counting on their math to be equal, yep. Are you all set?
Almost.
Okay, keep going, yep.
So I want to make sure I'm understanding these numbers, and hopefully it's useful information for everybody to walk through it slowly and step by step, because I think there's a lot of numbers being thrown around. But, so I'm seeing that 463,682 is equivalent in both the initial proposals and the new orders, the sewer fund appropriation.
Correct. And under option 1 and option 2, that number doesn't change because they're under both proposals are using all the sewer fund free cash but it'll stay inside the sewer fund to cover the deficit inside the sewer fund. It just so happens that account had money left over.
So the difference is the free cash at 1.5 million versus 1.2.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between it should be a $250,000 difference between the 700 and the 450.
Yep.
So it's the difference between the amount of general fund free cash.
Okay.
Sure. We're good?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Bacon?
Thank you. I just wish to voice an objection. I understand that substantively tonight, we cannot deal with this, but I think it's a false premise to be balancing the budget when we actually have $300,000 more in cash that we're just not able to consider on the table tonight when we have these orders before us.
Oh, you can consider it. I think it's well known that number is now not 2.2, it's
Yeah,
2.5.
I think when you look at the
But
two options, the decision
If I may
is,
complete my question.
Sure.
If I'm understanding the protocols correctly, we can't amend this agenda at this time, and we cannot
Correct.
entertain a late filed order to amend any of these proposals, correct?
Well, we can't ever amend those because they're appropriations, only the
Correct.
mayor could. And no, I would say he could not amend them at this point because of the fact that, because it's a special meeting and this agenda, in my opinion, was posted with these particular numbers, I mean, that we might work with if it's, we probably could get away with that, but
I would say not only that, the free cash right now is a constant, so there is no need to amend it. The free cash exists. What would need to be amended, which doesn't need to be amended, is the proposals as to how much we're taking from free cash or stabilization.
Right.
Because the funds are there. It's not as if free cash came down. And so everybody, when they vote, knows that we combined free cash is about $2.5 million. And based on option A or option B, we either have $800,000 in free cash left or we have $550,000 of free cash left. There's no need to change any order. The orders would stay exactly the same even if we had that $300,000 information before
correct.
the meeting. It changes nothing.
The only thing I will say procedurally, and we'll have to ask Kara to research, is if there is a vote of the city council that is required before we use free cash, that we have to accept free cash, or if we have to if there's some sort of acceptance of those numbers now that they have changed since the last meeting, that would be a procedural problem. But if that's not the case, and I can't recall off the top of my head, then that would be potentially a problem, because the number has changed from 2.2 to 2.5.
Yes,
Since
and,
our-
and that
yeah.
communication was provided to this body and the money exists. It's the city's money, and so now the city council, rightfully so, now has to decide where to allocate it based on balance of the
Exactly.
budget. But from the auditor and their team, there was no need to take an official vote to accept the free cash. The free cash just exists, and we can confirm that. But
Yeah, we'll take a look at that. But I don't, at the moment, foresee an issue. I agree with you. Counselor Alexander.
Thanks. So neither of these two proposals touches that 300. That 300 would sit in the free cash account, whether we
Exactly.
use 700 or we use 450.
You'd have to have a proposal that says 150 from stabilization fund.
And more from free cash dipping into the uncertified so far or unaccepted certified free cash, whatever it is,
Correct.
which we couldn't do until next Wednesday anyway.
Well,
because it's
so
not in
2
front of
days
us.
from now.
Because it's not in front of us.
Correct.
But if
That's
we
my
wanted
point.
to Councilor Vacon's point though, if we wanted to go down that road, and we'd obviously need
We'd have
the
to
mayor
vote
would-
these two proposals
These
down.
would both have to go down.
Correct.
So that there's nothing accepted, and then the mayor would have to come in with a proposal to spend that 300 to balance the budget.
Correct.
Which I think he was pretty clear he is not inclined to do.
Or resubmit these proposals.
Or resubmit these proposals again, and we'd be sort of where we are, but maybe possibly with 3 proposals on Wednesday.
Correct.
So that's all. Thank you.
And Mr. President, if I may, and just to complete my objection, we received the communication after 2 o'clock on the day of the special meeting, which changes the context of the votes that we're taking. Most of us work during the day. We don't even get these communications till around 5 o'clock. And I think if we're going to take a collegial approach to dealing with very difficult issues, as I have asked of our legal department, please do not send me complex legal opinions an hour before I have to be at a meeting to digest and speak to. And I, with all due respect, ask for the same consideration from this administration. Thank you.
Okay, does anybody want to else be heard before we continue with off the procedural component and now onto the substantive matter at hand? Okay. All right, so we have had a motion that was adopted to amend the financial transfer languages with the signature of Bellamy. That is now before us. And the committee recommendation has still not changed as denied as to option 1. And we're now debating
Sorry,
that.
option 1 is 700 stabilization?
700, right, which is marked as 4A and 4B on the agenda, which is the 700,000 from stabilization and 1.7 cumulatively from free cash.
And the committee recommendation, I know they're not on the
As
table at
denied
the moment.
at this point.
For the other two, what was the committee recommendation?
They haven't taken them up. Those are coming in for the first time this evening. Finance has not debated the 450
The 450,
proposal.
okay, thank you.
Second.
Okay. Okay, motion has been made and seconded to pass the first reading. Under discussion. Counselor McGivern.
Mr. President, I made a motion to pass the first reading to speak in favor of the $700,000 and to say that I will vote for a $700,000 use of stabilization this evening, which would require us to match up with the 1.7 million transfer from free cash. At the Finance Committee meeting, you made some excellent points about option number 2. If there's not, knowing we need 10 votes for this, if there's not enough votes for option number 1, I certainly see option number 2 as a compromise. I will not vote for option number 3 if we go to Wednesday night. And I'm just stating that to let people know that, Wednesday night is 2 days away, but at the same time, it's not, to me, and when I make my remarks about $700,000, I think you'll see why I could not vote for $150,000. There's no surprise to why we're here this evening. We do this every year. We did the exact same thing last year. We knew during our budget discussion that we had a deficit. Yes, there's a structural deficit. We understand that. For the last 3 budget cycles, I've stated very clearly, structural deficits are not resolved immediately by budget cuts. Budget cuts are a stopgap measure to address structural deficits, to address a budget deficit for the purpose of getting us through a bridge gap until we know we have more revenue on the way. I think the most important discussion, most important remarks we heard this evening were from our financial advisor, Cinder, who Cinder goes back 30-something years with the city. When she originally came to the city, she worked for Fleet. Bank of America bought out Fleet. Eventually Cinder went on to a finance, I can't even think of the institution she works for now. But all along these decades has stuck it out with the city and gone through thick and thin times in terms of our budget and our very good times and our very poor times. She's an incredibly knowledgeable woman. I think most of us that heard her talk this evening can agree to that. And without unquoting her, I think she gave us some ideas of, yes, it's okay to use stabilization carefully. Don't do it just on the basis of correcting the deficit, but do it with a thought in mind for what's going to happen over the next 2 or 3 years. She said very, very eloquently, we have, as a city, been conservative for decades. We have not let this budget grow since 1992, when the city passed an override, something that was unheard of for a city of our size. The voters came through in that year and saved police, saved the fire department, saved the DPW, and to me said, we don't want more taxes, but we want those services. And I have always taken the position that if there's a light at the end of the tunnel, I will fight for the services we need. The fire department is at bare minimum 3 people, 3 firefighters per apparatus, 7 apparatus. When there's an emergency, a medical emergency, which we've all agreed that we want the fire department to be first responders, they take people off an apparatus to be on the medical response if they have to send out the medical SWAT vehicle or if they send out a pumper. There are costs to that, but it's something that we've agreed. The police department. When I started, and I think when Councilor Jardine started, there was close to 100 police officers, detectives and patrolmen in that budget. There's 88 this year. Do we want to go lower? DPW, we know what we went through last year. We know what happens when we get the bad winters. But what about trash pickup? No one talked about trash pickup this year in the budget. Are we saying it's time not to pick up trash? I, for one, would like to fight for those services. And I think that's important because I think the services we provide, at least as we all don't like property tax, and it's by no other means than what the state tells us it's the biggest revenue, and they alone can tell us how to tax and how to look for revenue within our schemes. That alone is our biggest revenue source of local dollars. Property tax is not fair. I agree. I think we could have a whole discussion on that, but it's what we have. Stabilization, the classification vote next week is something that allows us to at least move some of that unfairness around. But the services are what we're talking about this evening. I believe in the higher number of stabilization for one reason, because we know we're going to need other dollars to be transferred before the end of the fiscal year. I would much rather be dealing with free cash over the next 6 months, or at least some free cash over the next 6 months, and not get into a stabilization argument in 3 months when we need money for the fire department. God forbid if we have a bad winter, and for the police department. At least we can deal with some free cash, a resemblance of what we've done for many years to come. Cinder said we've done the right things. We need to look for new revenue. Part of our deficit is the sewer fund. The sewer fund should not be coming out of property tax dollars. We heard from the people in West Holyoke this year about a stormwater fee. The sewer fund is coming out of their tax dollars. They don't have sewers. Most of Smith's Ferry doesn't have sewers, yet they're paying for a deficit in the sewer fund. That's not right. It hasn't been right for the last 2 years. It's not right this year, and it won't be right in any year. The sewer rate needs to be adjusted accordingly to correct that deficit. Of course, we have free cash in the sewer fund, but we have a deficit. And I'm not an auditor. I'm not the biggest financial wizard in the world. I wish someone could explain that to me. But we have a sewer plant that is operating under cost at a budget that is near level funded on an annual basis. What we're paying for is what we did and we bonded for the combined sewer overflow correction when we built in Berkshire Street, when we built the large plant to handle the overflows of our sewage not going into the Connecticut River untreated. As much as I'd like to see more federal funds come down the road for that, I don't want to see our sewage untreated in the Connecticut River. And I think as a city, we all agree to that. It's a question of how to fund it, and the federal government stiffed us on that one. But the $700,000, the reason I'll vote for that first this evening is so that we can deal with free cash down the road. I believe if we want to address the structural deficit, we have to see orders about reducing government. So far, we've kept government at bare minimum at what it has been for decades with very few additions. And I think we've been conservative. We heard that from a financial advisor who doesn't just look at Holyoke. She works for many communities and she understands the finances of what's going on across Massachusetts. She gave us, I think, some compliments tonight that we should be proud of. But this evening, I ask you to consider my words. $700,000, the compromise would be $450,000, but do not even think of $150,000 because that'll cause nothing but problems down the road.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to speak to a couple points. First off, just so we all can reminisce here, on November 24th, we got a letter from the mayor that said, after the city council passed the fiscal year 2016 budget in June, we were left with a $2.8 million deficit. That's the first sentence in that letter. We did not pass that budget. If anyone that was here on that Saturday would recall, that budget was voted down. We cut about $2 million and some change out of that budget. Actually, probably more, if I could recall correctly. But, you know, the issue comes down to the city council is always the bad guy. You know, we need to get a budget that is on the numbers here. You know, I don't agree with, you know, taking money from this and that and to stabilize the budget. I would prefer seeing a budget that is stabilized. I mean, you know, the fire department 6, 7, 8 months ago came to us about those 10 streetlights that are blinking. They're not blinking because it's the Christmas season. They're blinking because we don't not have the money to fix them. Okay, and 10 streetlights are going to cost us $1 million. Where are we going to get that $1 million? Cabot and High Street, that light is blinking. It's an absolute danger. They're blinking all over the place again, and they're not blinking for the holiday season. They've been blinking for months. They're blinking because we do not have the money to fix them. So where are we going to get that $1 million to fix those 10 very, very important streetlights before some kid drives through it and drives into a caravan, right, full of kids? I mean, it's there. It's going to happen unless we fix that. So, you know, there's no money tree back out in the backyard here. I totally agree. Nobody wants to see services cut. Nobody does. But, you know, we need to start thinking, or the maker of the budget needs to start thinking about innovative ways to develop a budget that's presented to us. So the city council isn't the bad guy where we have the fire department and the police department saying, hey, we got to cut services. The DPW is going to bi-weekly trash pickup. Oh, it's the city council's fault. It really shouldn't be. The city council needs to be given a budget that we can work with. We can't be grabbing money from here and there in the stabilization fund and the sewer fund to fund a budget to make people exist. You know, today I watched the finance committee meeting today. Great job, folks. Everyone had great points. Everyone had a different point. All very great. But I mean, you know, the administration talked about, you know, days off for the morale of the city. Well, I mean, you know, the clerks that are working don't have the day off. Well, the dispatchers are in that same union, and guess what? They're going to get paid that day, and they're going to get paid a little extra money because they're working because the rest of their union is off. So to think that it's just like it's just a couple days off here and there, it really isn't. You know, I mean, and if you look at previous administrations, and I've talked to the personnel director about the jobs that are no longer with us. Well, I mean, those jobs have all come back. New jobs have been created. How are we going to fund all these jobs? Your choices are to have a fully staffed fire department, a fully staffed police department, or to have these new jobs that are coming out of nowhere that people we're not even aware of that's happening. I heard another counselor talking about raising permit fees. Terrible idea. Meals tax went up. The building department permits went up. The health department permits went up. How much more do you want to put on the guy that owns a house? Or the woman that's living on a fixed income that worked for 50 years of her life in a mill at AMPAT. And now we're just going to, nope, we don't have the money, but what we're just going to raise everybody's taxes. Everybody that owns home, let's just raise taxes. You want to go out to eat, we're going to raise your taxes. You want to put a little porch in your backyard? Well, the permit fee just went up. I mean, we can't continue to do this. The budget has to be cut. We can't have, I mean, we have a large government. Again, the city council, since the day I got on the city council, I've been pushing for a smaller city council, and I pushed to get my seat removed because I want to sacrifice for my city that I was born and raised in and live in and own a home in and pay taxes in. Take my 10 grand, Put it back in the city, because, you know, I might not be here in 2 years, and that's fine with me, right? So I feel like I've accomplished something. We need to cut this. We have the largest city council in the city of Holyoke, and some of my colleagues were against the idea of reducing that. I also voted against the Quinn bill. I voted not to defund the $1 million, but the $500,000 that is coming out of the taxpayers' pockets, I voted against. Go back to Boston. Boston wants to give us the 500 grand, I'm all for it, but I don't want to put up my 500 grand. The same city councilors that didn't want to cut the city council didn't want to cut the Quinn bill. So where is this money going to come from? I want to be popular. I want to be a city council for years and years and years, but you know what? Hard decisions are hard decisions, and they're unpopular. We need $1 million to fix 10 streetlights. Where's the money coming from? Right? It ain't coming, you know where it's going to come from? It's going to come from me and everybody else that's paying taxes out there, because there's no mountain of money in the backyard. The police station, the old police station that's next attached to City Hall, guess what? It's collapsing. And the mold and the mildew that's been infested in that place is now coming into City Hall and impacting the health and safety of City Hall employees. What are we going to do about that? Anybody know about that? Anybody got the money? Does somebody have a bank account somewhere that we can figure this all out? I mean, you know, thinking about how to combine departments. When the Wisteria Hearst director left, maybe putting Jeff Bianchi, the arts director, maybe putting him in that position, right? And making that, have his office at Wisteria Hearst. Innovative way of thinking, out of the box thinking. Now we've just cut a position, cut the benefits, and we still have the arts director and we still have Wisteria Hearst open. That's a concept of thinking about creating a budget. I've run a budget, and I used to do the same thing. I'd ask for $1 million, and the mayor would cut it down to $700,000. But if you look at previous administrations, many positions were cut to make the budget run. Not from fire, not from police, but in City Hall. We have a very big City Hall. And I don't want to see anybody unemployed, but when people leave and they retire, as they have done under the past 4 years, does that position need to be filled? I mean, we really, I'm against, you know, the whole, let's take this money, move that money. We get all this information at the last minute, and of course, it's a city council at the back. If they don't care about public safety, your trash is going to be left out, your house is going to burn down, you're going to get robbed because we don't support public safety. Malarkey. I'm a huge supporter of public safety. Love it all. I'm more than willing. If the police department wants a new cruiser, bulletproof vest, cameras on the car, I'll give them the money. Did they need the $500,000 for the Quinn bill? You know, I mean, those are the tough, unpopular decisions that we are forced to make. So to pontificate about public safety, that, you know, some of us may not feel that is important to us, it's absolutely not true. We all have families here. We all have children. We want response to our family. I want my trash picked up. But if it's not the trash, if it's not the police cars, if it's not the fire cars, what is it going to be? It's got to be something. So I just, you know, I'm not voting for the, you know, unfortunately, I'm not probably going to be voting for the $700,000. And it's not due because, you know, we got a great letter from Chris Butler, 3-page letter. Chad Cunningham spoke eloquently tonight about the need of it, but again, we don't even know that money's going to go there. We could vote for that $700,000, and you know what? Maybe it's going to create 6 more positions in the treasurer's office. We don't know where that money's going. There's no guarantee it's going to the fire department. Give me the guarantee that it's going into the fire department, and that's an argument that I'm willing to listen to. Thank you.
I don't know, did the mayor want to address that? It sounded like there was some notion that, did you want to talk about the proposal is there going to be a free cash appropriation to the fire department if?
I'll just repeat what I said before, that there's anticipated overtime requests in the amount of $400,000, exactly what I said in an email to you, copied all the counselors. You had asked, what are some overtime requests, and I answered $400,000 between police and overtime.
Okay,
So no different, there's been no commitment, there's nothing in writing. I just know that I expect that a request will come in based on conversation with the chiefs via the communication from the auditor to all department heads. What do you expect between now and the end of the fiscal year? But
I think
this vote on 700 or 450,
that doesn't have an impact.
It's not connected, and I let
will
Chris
you
Butler,
agree? I think we can agree that they're not
connected. I let
connected.
Chris Butler know earlier today via email that there's nothing before the council tonight regarding police or fire overtime. And if those folks want to make a correlation, they're welcome to do that, but there's nothing
Right.
firm about that.
And just so we're crystal clear on this point, because I think we need is, you're exactly right, Mayor. An appropriation could be made at a future date from stabilization fund for fire overtime, police overtime, whatever, you fill in the blank overtime, or it could be made from free cash towards fire overtime, police overtime. It's
I
a
got an
question
email-
of taking it from the fund and putting it into free cash versus, but either way would require a future action by you and a future action by us.
Without a doubt. I got an email that the fire department would be here, and I wrote back and let them know that you do know that there's nothing on the agenda regarding, and so there's a correlation being made. I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, right. I think so. We can clarify that. Councilor Greenie.
As one who has recently benefited from the services in Hoyoke, I certainly am not going to vote for anything that's going to take away services, especially from fire EMTs. As you know, on August 13th of this year, I suffered an illness at home, and the first responders were the Hoyoke Fire Department. And I went into cardiac arrest in the ambulance, and the first responders brought me back after I flatlined. So I realized how important these services are, not only to me, but to the community, because I was able to spend Thanksgiving weekend with my family, my 4 children, my 4 grandchildren. So whatever we do here, I think it's very serious business, because it could happen to any one of us at any time, any one of our children at any time, and we have to make sure that we provide these safety and security services to our people. It's paramount that we do that. Our people are depending upon it. As far as the $700,000, I can't put a $700,000 fee on anybody's life. I can't put a $400,000 fee on anybody's life. I can only know what it meant to me, and I think these are serious issues that we have to consider, and we better make the right decision.
Definitely. Anybody else like to be heard on this issue? Councilor Alexander.
Thanks. 2 things. One is, this is a discussion about balancing a budget we've already seen, a budget we've already voted on, a budget that we know exactly where every dollar in that budget is going, in theory anyway. Things do move around occasionally, but we know where the money is going. There is no debate about whether some of it is going to the fire department or some of it, or are we cutting the police department. We're funding a budget that we've already voted to approve with a bunch of amendments back 6 months ago. What's in front of us tonight is not whether we fund the budget or whether we balance the budget. It's how we balance the budget. Do we pull $450 from stabilization, or do we pull $700 from stabilization? Either way, we're going to balance the budget. The total we're going to appropriate tonight towards balancing the budget is 2.4. It's either 450 and a bunch to get to 2.4, or it's 700 and a bunch to get to 2.4. There is no difference between these two in terms of the effect on services in the city, or in terms of the size of the annual budget of the city. This is just, how do we get there? That's all. Thank you.
That's a great point. Councilor Bacon.
Thank you. I was going to make a similar point, but I won't reiterate, because I think Councilor Alexander made the point very clearly. But I would just reiterate, as Councilor Bresnahan said, this isn't about whether we're for or against any services in the city. It's simply about how to make a budget work and how to make the precious tax dollars that the taxpayers pay for service from the city actually serve them to the best of our ability. Thank you.
So, Councilor Leahy.
Yeah, just very quickly, a lot of people are talking about the services and whatnot, but I guess I will kind of piggyback on what Councilor Alexander had said, is this isn't a fire department spending what we're spending on tonight. This isn't the police department. This isn't the Department of Public Works. This isn't to go buy, well, it could be to go buy some salt, but this is something that I voted on. I voted on the mayor's budget, and what I'm voting on tonight is to fund that. I mean, I have I have a responsibility. I did A, now I got to do B. That's what we're doing. Now, when it comes to overtime, or when it comes down the road for other offices, let's just the law department that needs outside counsel money or that sort of thing, they're going to be before us. Then we're going to make that decision. But tonight, what we're doing is just solving the equation to what we started. Thank you.
Yeah, and let's just
are
remind
confusing
ourselves,
this.
we're raising funds to now support a budget that we already voted on in June. For example, just to, well, the council voted it down, but as we know, it takes effect unless we remove the money. And the fire department came in, they asked for X, the mayor gave them X minus from what the chief wanted, and, but we approved every dollar that was there. There were no cuts in the fire department budget by the city council, so let's just, but this, however we vote on this evening, doesn't give the fire department more money, and it doesn't give them less money. That decision has already been made. Councilor McGivern.
No, it doesn't. But if we don't balance the budget, it forces the mayor to reduce the budget, which will be drastic because we're halfway through the fiscal year. Reduction of a budget now, which is 100% personnel, would be a reduction of services. So let's stop kidding ourselves. It is about services. Yes, our vote tonight is about balancing, but it's about whether or not we want to fight for the services that budget that went through does provide. Councilor Graney is right. The medical response from the fire department is expensive. It's part of what their overtime cost is about. A barely funded budget for a minimum of 3 firefighters per apparatus and to do medical response is what we're fighting for. Where it comes from, I understand, is what the actual vote we're taking this evening, but we're talking about services. Because if we don't balance the budget, you might as well tell the mayor to file a new budget with less of everybody. And that's when we get into the argument of where the services are going. It's not a, you know, we talk about, my opening remarks weren't about services, and my opening remarks I thought were clear, were about what we discussed during the budget hearing, and Council President is right. We had a lot of affordability discussions. We had a lot of discussions about what does a budget cut mean. A budget cut does not reduce service. It just takes money out of the budget for a line item until you change the ordinance, until you change something and reduce a department, a clerical person, a police officer, a firefighter. That's the reduction of a budget to get away from the structural deficit. The budget is a moving target. It changes every day you wake up. You know, the money, the numbers that are here could be a little bit different tomorrow. But we have to do it now because we need to set the tax rate in 2 weeks. So we can talk about revenue, we can talk, and Council President talked about pontificating. I was in favor of a smaller city council, if you remember. I said, let's reduce the city council by 4, but nobody wanted to listen to my scenarios, what that was about. The voters reduced it by 2, but we should have gave them the choice of reducing it by 4, because I think they may have agreed to that also, but that's over the dam. I'm just stating the difference this evening is which stabilization number we use. I'll vote in favor of the $700,000. If the majority disagree, I'll vote in favor of the $450,000. But what I won't do is walk out of here this evening or this week without saying to the mayor, we have to get some money into the budget to fund the services that we all want. Because we sit here and we plead and we tell the DPW what a great job they do when they come in here for snow removal. We sit here and we tell them what a great job they do for trash pickup. I was downtown for the Christmas tree lighting Saturday evening. 4 hours later, I was having a little bit of lunch at one of my favorite downtown establishments with a cold beverage. I had a Happy Hampton wrap. I had a Happy Hampton wrap, and I washed it down with a Guinness. We got locked in because of a guy running around downtown with a 9mm semi-automatic pistol, and the police department did a great job. They responded quickly. They caught the guy on Hampton Street. They chased him into a building, went up to the 4th floor with rifles drawn, and were able to apprehend that person. That's the public safety I'm fighting for. The firefighters, when they respond to medical, the firefighters, when they respond to a fire, that's the public safety I'm fighting for. I think most Hoyokers want their trash picked up without having to go to a different means, without having to pay it in a different way. And I think that's what we fight for. But we have to balance the budget that we agreed upon, whether we voted to pass it or not. It became law, and it's the budget that we have this year, and I think it's the services that our constituents, our taxpayers want. We are conservative. You heard it from the financial advisor this evening. Shouldn't have to say that. As a city, we've been conservative in terms of our budgets. Our budget hasn't grown for 3 years. There are things in the budget that we cannot overcome, where it's health insurance, it's the budget busters every community in the Commonwealth faces. We have to find ways to do it. She suggested new revenue, slight increase in the sewer fee might help out. a slight increase in, the ways that we look at things could help out. But if you want the services to continue, don't kid yourself. We have to balance the budget. That's the argument I made.
Counselor Leahy.
Yeah, thank you, and I applaud Counselor McGivern. I think he has a lot of passion and vision. However, I think that his debate should be for a different night when we're talking about those things. Tonight, all we're doing is balancing the budget. I think everybody in here is supporting public safety. I also have not heard one person talk about not balancing the budget tonight. So I don't know why this part of the debate's coming up, because I think that we're all in favor of balancing the budget. Let's just get to it.
We also have a legal requirement to balance the
Right.
budget,
So
and we cannot set the third quarter taxes
Tax rate.
unless we do balance the budget.
So having said that,
there's no option
get to
where
it.
we don't do that. Right, exactly.
Motion.
Okay, we're still at first reading now on this, and does anybody else want to discuss the merits and demerits of the $700,000 proposal? The chairman, Mr. McGee.
Mr. President, just so we're clear, 700, 450, 150. Those are your three options currently before us. Well, the 150 not yet. That's
150
technically
yet.
a
No,
150,
Wednesday.
not
But
tonight.
put it out there because it's been brought up.
Yes.
That technically is an option if it were to come to light. To me, I won't vote for the 150 simply because if you look at the numbers, if you go with the 700, you have about 800,000 left in free cash. If you go with the 450, it's 550 left over. So really, you're balancing the budget and what's left over in free cash to then deal with the issues that we normally come up with. And if you look at historically our budget cycle towards the end of the year, it's roughly around 500,000 of transfers from departments looking for money, overtime, law department, what have you. What I was disappointed about is I asked, and you helped co-sponsor, was to have the department heads come in and show us what those shortfalls would be. Nothing. An email went out by the mayor saying, well, we're working on that. And then Bellamy said, well, he misquoted me. And I said, okay, no one came in because emails went out, things got contradicted. What is currently out there? Well, maybe 200,000 for fire, but if you look at certain articles, it's 300 or 50, 350. Police, same thing, around 200,000. The retirees, 288 was the number thrown out. Legal is off by 100,000. Elections, they don't have enough money to run elections. We have a presidential primary come up. They're roughly around 50. Snow. So far, we've been really lucky. But remember, we said that last January. Oh, no snow. And then 4 consecutive Mondays. Boom, 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 boom. A foot of snow each Monday, of which we went into stabilization this time around for 375. So snow is always out there because it can happen. And really, we can't budget for it, so that's just an unknown. Now, if you look at prior year, we were going to take all these expenditures and then take from stabilization. And the argument was, well, if you just take out interest and you have a plan, then it really doesn't ding you for the rating. Well, we took out 375. It's in realistically, you can only take out about 175 because it's interest. We get about, 540 a year for interest. So if you're going by that argument, well, you should only touch interest each and every year from stabilization and may or may not have an impact depending on what we heard tonight. You also have a plan, and of which the bond counsel came back, and if you look at her responses to questions, she says throughout each answer, you kind of need a plan. The 3-year plan that you're proposing, which no one's ever seen, may or may not work. It has to be realistic. So once again, if we keep pulling from stabilization, how does that impact us going forward, especially for 2017 and 2018? And with all these unknown expenditures that could be out there, how does that really impact us? Which then is we could give the full amount, 700. You have 800,000 in there to play with, and lo and behold, what do we always do? We put up a huff and a puff, and then we approve it. And it gets paid. Or we take a stance and we just say, look, 450 seems reasonable. It gives you about 550 of free cash to pay with, and based on some of the expenditures, we can play with those numbers, and we're probably going to fall in line with what we normally see. Which then is, yeah, we went over interest a little bit by standards for stabilization, but it's kind of an issue that we're going to see. And now we have to make some tough choices. Do we do bi-weekly trash pickups? I brought that up once before, I got pounded on. Also, do we stop hiring, put a freeze? We currently have a tax collector saying, I need a position. If you don't fill it, my office is in danger because I don't have enough staff. But yet, I just saw 2 postings. Treasurer's office and the planning department needs a clerk. Those are posted right away. Are they necessary? Are they needed? Or do they have enough staff to get through the problems that we have? We haven't gotten to address that. Everything came in late, 11th hour. Just pass it. We've heard that before. Just pass it and we'll deal with it. That's not how you plan. This thing should have came to us in September, early October, and started dealing with it. Started doing the plan. Now it's almost the holiday season. You have to set the tax rate. Just do it. The last minute push. Of which, I know we couldn't receive the communication, but then in the mayor's communication, in the middle part, this means certain positions will not be filled, others will be merged. We have potentially identified 200,000 of savings. Can I see a list of that? What savings are we talking about? We don't know. We have unknowns all over the board. Just pass it, and we'll deal with it as it comes. No, our job is to deal with it now and minimize the impact. That's what the bond counsel lady said. Prepare for 2007, 2018, because that's going to be critical for your ratings. She said it was clear as day. So do we just give the full amount, or do we try and do some buffering? To me, I think the 450 is a nice compromise. It gives us enough inside the free cash account to get us through the rest of the year. You know, we have to make some tough choices, as everyone has said. It doesn't impact the services that we receive. If you read the report from the fire department, it's lengthy. It's 3 pages. I didn't get through it all, but the one that they did give, the 1-pager, with regards to the brownouts, I know it's not about public service or anything, but this is an impact that you should really understand. Ontario Ave, due to the brownouts, we didn't have coverage. And there was a 48-minute response. That's you can't do that. I'm not saying this tonight is about public services or anything else, but it's something that has to be remembered. Joe pointed out perfectly. My issue is this: what number can we work with? 700 to me is a little excessive. It allows for us to say, well, we save some at the end, dump it back in stabilization, say I funded it. I've seen that trick before. My argument is go with the 450. You balance the budget. You should have enough based on historic averages that we've seen about towards the end of the year. Hopefully we don't have to go back in. But from what we heard tonight is even if you have to go in a little bit, that still doesn't really ding you. So to me, 450 seems logical. It seems fair. And the other two are just, I think, off on both sides. The middle point is where we should be going. Thank you.
I would, at some point, ask the city council to suspend the rules to allow me to make a few points.
I think the rules are suspended, but I'll make a motion to allow
Yeah,
the president to
just in case.
speak on his behalf.
Yeah. Is there a second? All in favor? So moved. I'll keep that brief, but I did want to make a couple points in the discussion.
All right, 9:10.
Stuff that might not have been covered. Yeah, Councilor Bacon.
Thank you. I would just like to note, following up on Counselor McGee's comments, in finance, we had a discussion, and it was noted, thanks to Counselor Jordan, and I'm very appreciative that you had the time to crunch those numbers before the meeting, which many of us did not, or you took the time, I should say. I'm not going to presume you had it hanging around.
I make the time.
But in any event, he noted that there was $165,000 remaining of interest earned in the stabilization fund because we have already utilized $375,000. So I would note that if you take the $165,000 and you utilize the $300,000 free cash that was found this morning or whenever, and you put it with that $165, that gets you to the $450 that we're talking about. If we approve the $450 tonight and you throw in the $300,000, you're really at the $700,000, which we're saying is too much because there's commentary and actions taking place in City Hall that, from my perspective, show that there is not a seriousness around the budget issues that we are facing in this city. I mean, it's one thing to talk about shortages in response or in timing of response to fires, but well, at the same time, we're closing City Hall for 3 days for Thanksgiving for morale. Well, I'd be more worried about the morale of the employees if they get laid off than I would be about giving them an extra 3, 4, 5 days off. I mean, it snows an inch and City Hall closes. It was never like that before. I mean, this is serious business, and I don't see the City Hall being operated as a serious business. So whatever action we take tonight, we need to send the message to everybody in the city and the people who are paying the freight, the taxpayers, that we get it. They're tapped out. They've had enough. And I think they spoke loudly in this election. And I don't know, maybe I'm the only one that heard them, but they were speaking loudly and clearly to me. So I just want to make the point. I'm seeing that there's not an appetite. I'm seeing that, you know, it looks, sounds, and feels like once again we got put in a box by the mayor, giving us all this, throwing us all this stuff at the last minute, and we're going to sit there and go, oh, what can we do? We must budget and balance the budget. But I'm here to tell you the 165 plus 300 adds up to 450 to me. So I'm warm on the 450, but I see 450 there. Thank you.
Does anybody else want to speak on this? Okay, seeing no hands, I'll just take a quick moment to just make a few points that perhaps others did not. One was, you know, we had these options, and I'm glad, and I want to thank the mayor for giving us option 2, which was the 450. I did ask that we would be given this option. Obviously, I've already shown my cards. I'm not warm to the 700, I think. And there's a reason why I'm not warm to it. And you know, by the way, I've received some criticism lately of perhaps using various political axioms and not properly crediting them to others. So whoever made the statement that, you know, if you don't be mindful of your history, you're in a situation to repeat it, whoever came up with that great axiom, and feel free to give me the name at another meeting. But the point of that axiom is the fact that I have watched over my 20-something years here get us to a point of where were we in 1990 and 91? And you see what got us into that situation. That was just before I came into city government. And what were the lessons learned of that? In my humble opinion, a lot of tough choices were not made. These same type of debates went in, and I listened from, you know, the outsider perspective, so I want to be fair to those that were in authority in those late 80s. But a lot of these same conversations, and some of those discussions didn't take place. There were no real reserves in those days, and state aid was tight, just as it is today, and all of these things. And it ended up to a point where we hit really basically a financial collapse, okay, of the city financially. And so you had to do two things. One, borrow money from the state. The other was turn to the voters for a massive tax override, about 4 million plus, okay? And so some of the takeaways from that was, we won't do that again, right? We're going to create this thing called the stabilization fund, which we use it routinely now. And so monies were put in this fund so that when we had these conversations, at least there was some funding source. And so in the 90s, we listened to that and we put the money in there. We now know it was $8.7 million. That was the principal put in over the 90s. No principal payment has gone in since 1999. And so we had a structural deficit of about $2 million, but we've been carrying it. For people that feel that somehow we're not taxing the citizens enough, well, the tax levy was $28 million in 1999. It's $52 million today, and has been for the last years. So we've raised taxes $24 million a year, and yet it's unsatiable. We can't seem to stop the spending. You know, look at people's tax bills, right? So it isn't for a lack of getting enough money out of the citizenry by any means. We're spending it here, right? Let's make no mistake about that. So when you talk about certain cuts, the reality is we need to be disciplined because it isn't an endless pit of money that we call voters. So over the 2000s, that decade, we prided ourselves on saying, yes, we never put any money in, but we didn't ever touch the interest. Now where are we today? We're now touching the interest, and now we're exceeding the interest, okay? And so you can see this. All of our free cash is, we used to have free cash 6 and 7 million a year. It's gone, right? It's gone. And now we see the fact that we're seeing interest exceeded. Now we're going into the principal. Do we not know where this ends up, right? We're either going to make these decisions or someone is going to be down the road very soon to make them for us. Springfield, right? They didn't get the message. And someone came in and made those decisions for them. Chelsea came in and someone made those decisions for them. This is what's going to happen. This is how the movie ends, folks. We already know the ending. So while you're still in the second and third act of the play, fix it, right? Take an intermission and make course corrections, right? And so we can talk all day, how is that a service to anybody, including the people that put us in this room, to allow the community to be in a position ultimately to be turned over to somebody else? And do you think there are people likely from all out of town who are then going to come in here? This is our schools have been taken over already, right? Okay. So when we talk about how much money comes out of stabilization and all of that, those are real things. It's, to me, a disappointment. It's like a failure of us that we don't do everything we possibly can to protect that fund. That fund, which we have not put a dollar into it, but now we're taking out of it, under the premise that, well, it's all going to get better really soon. Who has evidence of that? I make evidence-based decisions. There is nothing but hope and aspirational in this rosy glassed view of the next few fiscal years. What's underpinning this notion that if we could just get through this, it hasn't changed in the last 4 fiscal years. What are we going to have? Residential growth, maybe 1% a year, maybe. We have some projects, that's great, but I'm going to give you a number to sober you up real quick. You got a retirement fund, okay? Next year's budget, it goes up $200,000. Every year after that, it's going to go up $600,000 a year. This is right here. Your retirement board has voted to fully fund the retirement account. Everybody, all city employees, they love their pensions. They all want them someday. This is this piece of paper. $600,000 a year growth. Where's that coming from? We have no plan to address these things. So that's all the bad news. Here's the good news. The good news is the mayor has extended an olive branch. He's fully engaged. I'm fully engaged. Everybody in this room is fully engaged. I'm going to ask the finance committee to meet with the mayor, and we're going to have to make some serious decisions, and we're going to have to stick to them at some point. And everybody loves police, everybody loves fire, everybody loves, I maintain we can do a lot of these things without cutting any of those things, okay? I don't think there's wholesale layoffs and all these other things, but we've got to make some of these tough decisions. Stop me if you heard this one before, pension obligation bonds. How'd that ever work out? We never did it, right? We never did it. Everybody was in agreement that we would do it. We finally have allowed ourselves, I'm told from the former treasurer, that we put ourselves now in such a difficult financial position that we can't get approved for pension obligation bonds. So we've now looked like we've lost a window of opportunity. Maybe we can get that rekindled. I don't know. But we got to get a lot of these structural things, pension payments out to 2040 or 2032. We don't need to lay off 20 police officers. We need to fix real serious stuff like this. So there is cause for hope, and that's my point. And hopefully with all these other things that we got going on in the community, we can reinvigorate it. But make no mistake, the council was handed a budget that was out of balance by $4.5 million. Imagine the conversation you'd be having today if you didn't make those $1.6 million in cuts back in June. There's no money to take it. You imagine you'd be looking at a $2 million appropriation right now from stabilization, okay? That's to the credit of everyone in this room. My hat off to all of you, because you had to take the tough votes to cut that 1.6. Guess what? You're gonna have to do, it's gonna be a rerun in June, some of our new people. So let's hang on here, let's balance this tonight. I can see the writing on the wall. I myself am on the conservative side of the pendulum. I would prefer the 150. I don't think that's going to happen, so I would encourage the 450. And we'll see what takes us here to go forward. So, anybody else want to be heard on these proposals? Counselor McGivern, for the third time, does he have leave of the city council to speak for a
Yes.
third time?
Briefly.
All in favor? Aye.
2 minutes.
Counselor McGivern.
Counselor McGivern voted no.
Oh, he voted against allowing himself to speak? No, I don't believe.
Thank you, everyone. I will be brief. Kevin makes some great points about 1992. I just add two things to the scenario,
Sure.
not to counter what he's saying, because it was a very difficult year. The voters, part of our tax increases that you do cite were because the voters gave that to us in an override.
Right.
And we can argue about why they did it one way or the other. That's their choice, and they did do it. But there was a $5 million deficit that was created in 1982 when Proposition 2.5 was passed. I won't go into the whole long story because you told me to be brief. A $5 million deficit was created, and that was part of what Mayor Dunn inherited after he took over in Room 1. And that's what he fought throughout his career as mayor, was correcting that deficit. And he did it similar to what we do with budget cuts, with hiring freezes, with being very careful about the budget, and it still wasn't enough, and Kevin's right about that. A structural deficit is more than just hiring freezes and a lot more than just the simple things that we do and what we did to balance the budget this year. When we balanced that budget this year, the 2.4 that we're looking at right here, half of that is the sewer fund. Just remember that.
On the motion.
All right, so we're at first reading. All in favor of passing the first reading on the 700,000 and the 1.7 proposal, okay? Motion carries on first reading.
One person?
I didn't hear any no, so it's 1-0.
Pass the second reading.
Okay, pass the second reading.
Second.
All right, just so we're clear on the motion before us, remembering now the committee recommendation was to deny, okay?
So a yes vote is to deny?
Yes.
Mr. President, the motion on the floor is to pass the first reading. That's an
Right,
amendment
the
to
committee
committee
report was to
recommendation.
deny, though.
No, the motion on the floor was to pass the
the
first
first reading.
reading.
Yeah.
It was
First reading on the
recognized, it was
committee report.
seconded. No. Pass the first reading of what's before us.
Yeah.
The $700,000 combined with the free cash.
Right.
It's semantics, but that's
So
what the
you're,
motion was.
so what you're saying is that you altered the committee recommendation, which is to deny.
What I'm saying is we've had two committee reports, the second one this evening. On the one before that, and I sat through the committee like you did.
This is gonna end up the same way, you know that,
I
right?
know that,
It's a
but
yes or
in
no.
fairness, all we had to do was this in the first place. But the committee report to deny on the $500,000 was because of the wording. We had a similar wording problem with this. So in fairness, I think I would argue that some committee members and other committee members, I'm not going to speak for them, I know some, and it definitely wanted to make a motion to deny this scenario, but the fact was the language had to be changed. And Councilor McGee, the chairman, made that point in committee for both of these items.
This is not worth arguing over. We can
I'm
easily
not
fix it up.
arguing.
No, I
But
understand.
I'm
That's
just
fine.
saying, it's at the second
yeah.
reading.
I
We can
wanna
shoot it
move-
up and we can shoot it down.
That's fine, absolutely, and that's exactly what's gonna happen. It's just the difference between a yes vote means to adopt the committee report, which is to defeat it or no, so that's fine. Mr. McGivern is arguing that when he made his motion, that it was to have it in the affirmative. The committee recommendation is to adopt, so I will instruct you as such when we go to do the final vote at the roll call. Okay, Council Lisi with a question.
And are we voting as a package?
Yes,
Thank
it's
you.
gonna be, yeah, these were already combined as a package, the 700 with the 1.7, okay? All right, so let me walk through this now. Debate has concluded. We're now gonna vote. This is gonna be a roll call vote. I'm gonna get my roll call sheet. The motion on the floor is to adopt items 4A and 4B, these two committee recommendations as amended by the auditor. The by a yes vote will be in favor of using $700,000 of stabilization fund and 1.742 million of free cash. Okay? And then, depending on what happens with this, we will then consider the other alternative. Okay? So we're all crystal clear. So a yes vote is in favor of adopting these two things, a no vote is to deny both.
Mr. President, just
Yes, Councilor
point of
Bradley.
order, how many votes do we need?
10.
Thank you.
Okay? Without further ado, Councilor Alexander.
No.
No.
I don't want to spend 700,000 from stabilization. Did I get that right?
Yes.
A no vote is to not spend 700,000 from stabilization, and that, to defeat package one. Next up is Councilor Bartley.
No.
No. Bresnahan.
No.
Councilor Bresnahan votes no. Councilor Shatnoff.
No.
Councilor Shatnoff, no. Councilor Graney.
No.
Councilor Graney, no. Councilor Jordan votes no. Councilor Leahy.
No.
Councilor Leahy, no. Councilor LeBron Martinez.
Yes.
Councilor LeBron Martinez votes yes. Councilor Lisi.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Lisi votes yes. Councilor McGee.
No.
Councilor McGee, no. Councilor McGivern.
Yes.
Councilor McGivern votes yes. Councilor Tallman.
Yes.
Councilor Tallman, yes. Councilor Vacan.
No.
Councilor Vacan, no. Councilor Valentin.
No.
Councilor Valentin, no. Okay, so that is, the vote was 4 in favor, 10 against on that. So package one defeated 4-10, okay? So now this brings us to items 9, 10, and 11 on the agenda. I would recommend.
Motion to suspend the rules, take them up as a package.
Thank you.
Second.
So motion on the floor is to take 9, 10, and 11 as a package and to pass the first reading. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? I think we already have debated this pretty well. I think we know where we're all stand on this. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Pass the second reading?
Okay, motion's been made and seconded to pass the second reading. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I will call the roll. A yes vote is in favor of adopting the removal of $450,000 from the stabilization fund and to appropriate approximately $2 million, these two numbers combined, from the free cash for the purposes of all three of these cumulatively to balance the FY16 budget, okay? So a yes vote is to adopt all three, a no vote is to deny all three. Beginning with Councilor Alexander.
Yes.
Councilor Alexander, yes. Councilor Bartley.
Yes.
Councilor Bartley, yes. Councilor Bresnahan.
Yes.
Councilor Bresnahan, yes. Councilor Shatnoff.
Yes.
Councilor Shatnoff, yes. Councilor Graney.
Yes.
Councilor Graney, yes. Councilor Jordan votes yes. Councilor Leahy.
Yes.
Councilor Leahy, yes. Councilor LeBron Martinez.
Yes.
Councilor LeBron Martinez, yes. Councilor Lisi.
Yes.
Councilor Lisi, yes. Councilor McGee.
Yes.
Councilor McGee, yes. Councilor McGivern.
Yes.
Councilor McGivern, yes. Councilor Tallman.
Yes.
Councilor Tallman, yes. Councilor Vacan.
Reluctantly, yes.
Councilor Vacan, yes. Councilor Valentin.
Yes.
Councilor Valentin, yes. That one is adopted 14-0. And that concludes
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
all the items. The rest of these Finance Committee reports will go to next week, okay? There's a motion to adjourn on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. We stand adjourned. Budget balanced. And Wednesday is canceled, okay? So no meeting on Wednesday. No special meeting Wednesday.